This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
Is he a young trailblazing banker turned corporate suit turned fintech entrepreneur who wears his take no prisoners persona on his sleeves?
मैं बोलता कम हूँ। मेरे को ये लगता है कि आपकी वर्ड्स की अहमियत है। लोगों से बातों में जीतने में मेरे को कोई शौक नहीं है। मेरे को असली में जीतना आता है।
Or an opinionated unicorn who doesn't shy away from taking potshot at peers?
The challenge with Paytm IPO became that in even private circles, right, there was a lot of talk that there is not enough demand at the level at which the company wants to price the IPO.
Is he an investor who is less of an angel and more of a motor mouth?
तू एज एन एंटरप्रेन्योर आया है या तू अपनी कंपनी बेचने आया, पहले तो ये क्लियर कर ले। ये सब दोगलापन है। मैं तेरा दोगलापन उतारता हूँ। को मैं 2 सवाल पूछता हूँ, आप यूएन, पेरिस, जिनेवा पता नहीं कहाँ पहुंच जाती है, मुझे पता ही नहीं जगह है कहाँ पे। यहाँ की बात करो ना, गुड़गांव, दिल्ली, नोएडा, फरीदाबाद, ये बातें करो यार।
Or an arrogant and entitled individual with questionable social etiquette?
Sorry, I don't know, sir, what you're saying.
You don't know what I'm saying?
Are you drunk, sir?
Are you dumb?
Or simply a lonely founder who is now feeling cornered?
I have a right to nominate who sits as my nominee on the board. And in the last month, I have seen him operate as a puppet of the investors, not as my nominee. And therefore, he doesn't enjoy my confidence. If you operate in a manner and side with the investors, when I need you the most, then you don't enjoy my degrees of confidence. You don't have a spine. And why should the puppet of investors be my nominee on the board?
Will the real Ashneer Grover stand up, please? As more and more skeletons tumble out of BharatPe's closet and allegations of fraud, related party transactions involving Grover and his family members fly thick and fast in this open season, it becomes even more pertinent for us to know who really is Mr. Grover and why is the once poster boy of fintech so angry.
मैं बोलता कम हूँ। तू एज एन एंटरप्रेन्योर आया है या तू अपनी कंपनी बेचने आया, पहले तो ये क्लियर कर ले। I have a right to nominate who sits as my nominee on the board.
You don't know what I'm saying?
We do know Grover and his wife Madhuri, who, surprise, surprise, was also the head of controls in the same company, have both gone on indefinite leave as the board has undertaken multiple probes and audits. The lines are clearly drawn. It's Grover versus everyone. And by that, I mean his venture capital investors, his board, who seems to have had enough of him and now wants him out. But can BharatPe survive without him? And most important of all, the repercussions of all this on Unity Small Finance Bank, its brand new joint venture with financial services firm Centrum Capital to build India's first truly digital bank. We will get a ringside view in this episode from two of my colleagues who have been tracking this story and the company right from its inception in 2018. It's Tuesday, February 8th. From the Economic Times, I'm Arijit Barman and you're listening to Ashneer Grover ko Gussa Kyun Aata Hai on the Morning Brief. Anyone tracking the fintech space in India will tell you Grover has always been a lightning rod, combative, pushy, and aggressive.
There is a heightened scrutiny now on the person's behavior and on a founder's behavior and the impact that that can potentially have not just within the company but externally.
That's Tarush, Bhalla, my colleague from Bangalore and our resident fintech expert.
I mean, Digbijay and me wrote a few weeks back on just the toxicity of just the culture that kind of undertakes and also his dealings with people. But, for reporters like Digbijay and me, who've been covering BharatPe for years now and right from its inception, it's very clear that there have been multiple examples of him, undertaking different efforts to not just kind of kill competition, but also do it in a way which is not very tasteful. Like, I mean, if I have to kind of give you some incidents, there has been, an open fight between BharatPe and PhonePe. So there was a time, I think, around, I think 2 years back in 2020, when BharatPe did resort to, predatory marketing, where they put up these flyers saying that, Paytm is a Chinese company or PhonePe is an American company and they're all anti-national and BharatPe is an Indian company. So I think there have been incidents in the past where the aggression is something that you can see. The bit about, if you're coming in my way, I will kind of knock you off because you cannot come in my way. I think that kind of an attitude has always been there around the personality, I think, that we kind of speak about.
This aggression and hunger for growth, said insiders and ex employees I spoke to anonymously, had made the organizational culture toxic for many months now and its foundations shaky. People come and people go, some leaving even without spending a year in the organization. For example, in 2021 alone, we saw the departures of 3 of its early employees, all heading important verticals. Here is another bizarre nugget for you. One of the co-founders of BharatPe, Bhavik Koladia, who was also once its biggest shareholder, the man who, as per grapevine, basically conceptualized everything, has had a previous conviction for credit card fraud in the US, but continues to remain involved in the company, building the tech and product despite selling down most of his shares to Grover and others. Even BharatPe's investors like Sequoia faced the brunt of Grover's ire. In short, this was a ticking bomb that was about to go off anytime. Let's ask Digbijay Mishra, also my colleague who knows both Grover and BharatPe well, what was really going on.
A lot of the culture or how the company in general operates, even regulators were getting upset. ET has reported about certain practices, so everyone kind of knew about everything, but no one really said anything because company was being able to raise rounds after rounds, valuation was increasing, so everyone was sort of turning a blind eye. And as a matter of fact, I mean, even in middle of whatever is happening, we also reported about the altercation between Ashneer and one of Sequoia's managing directors now. I mean, it happened in 2020, it got resolved as well, but that was a big red flag for any company, right? If a founder and an investor is locking horns like that, this is something which needs to be placed on record and can't be just hushed. What you mentioned about Bhavik, whatever his past has been, he still is one of the key guys in BharatPe, because you talk to regulator, you talk to any operational people, they are all saying that Bhavik is one of the critical guys. So even if there are questions about whatever happened in the US, you have someone in the company who is also very critical to the operation.
And that ticking bomb did go off right after New Year in the most curious fashion. Early in January, an anonymous Twitter handle posted an audio clip from back in October of last year where Grover was heard lashing out at his Kotak Mahindra Bank relationship manager for failing to secure a loan meant to buy shares of Nykaa during its IPO.
You don't know what I'm saying?
One of the people involved in these audio conversations did try to reach out to us before putting the audio clip on social media, and then we saw that it just suddenly the handle sort of put it on Twitter, and by evening people, especially journalists, started picking it up. And even though it was initially just about people reacting to it, but I think by day 2 it has started to taken its own shape, because this was the first time we are seeing a prominent founder of a major fintech startup valued at close to 3 billion, not just losing his cool, but not just that, but very the hurling abuses in a way that was shocking to even people who knew Ashneer well. I mean, again, disclaimer, he continues to maintain that this is fake.
The abrasive Ashneer was exposed for all, forcing him to step down and go on leave within days. Finally, the gloves were off.
The co-founder and managing director of BharatPe, Ashneer Grover, is taking a voluntary leave of absence from the company till the end of March this year. The board did not spell out the reasons for this decision. The move comes amid the controversy surrounding an alleged altercation between Grover and a Kotak employee, which has ended up in a legal suit.
But before we move ahead, it's important to understand what BharatPe really does and its secret sauce that led to its phenomenal growth within 4 years of existence.
BharatPe was actually one of the companies which tapped into this opportunity of UPI wave that was happening. I mean, UPI was growing like crazy, and while peer-to-peer transactions were already well established, it was just peer-to-merchant payments were getting expanded, and companies like PhonePe were also focusing in that area. And BharatPe kind of came with that sole focus at that point in time that all we want is merchants to be able to accept digital payments through UPI, no commission, nothing. And they went aggressive over it, like really aggressive. So that was how they started growing. And, as I said, it was synonymous with the growth of UPI. If you looked at any month's P2M data, they will be one of the top platforms cornering some market share.
What's P2M?
P2M, peer-to-merchant payments. Yeah. So that was it. But I think Ashneer's game plan for BharatPe was always clear that it'll be around lending, which is what you see BharatPe right now. The whole merchant focused business is at a high scale. But what he's really focusing right now, or at least before all this started, was this consumer lending product called PostPay.
So as Digbijay said, even if at the core of BharatPe it's all about payments, let me break it down here. Basically, its QR code allows merchants to accept payments from apps like Google Pay, PhonePe, or Paytm. That business works on wafer-thin margins. So Grover had to add layers on top of that. First, point of sale or POS machines, and then a foray into lending.
I would personally say that BharatPe was never a digital payments company. It was always a lending company right from the start, right? And payments was just a way of getting into it. And we've seen that, this is classic fintech models of the past, where payments is something where today every big fintech that you know about of the 2011 and the 12s of the world has entered the ecosystem through payments and then added like financial services on top of it. They were very sharp to say that we need to make money off the corpus that's flowing through our books. And I think in some ways they were very kind of strong to do that. Now, obviously, they are opening up, different avenues, PostPay being one of them, which is a consumer lending product also that they're looking at. Loyalty through the acquisition of Payback and loyalty-based payments, because now they kind of realize that, they have a merchant base and they want to create an ecosystem to kind of hold the consumers also onto it. And they were making money out of it, right? And that's the best part about it.
Yeah.
Because digital payments is a sum-zero game, and that's been becoming even more clearer with the years. But here's a company which is making money out of it, right? And now, there is a brief part of their history in the late 2020s and the early 2021s where they were going into the market and very aggressively raising debt, because they knew that lending is the end game that they want to kind of, be in, and create this juxtaposition of lending and payments, right? I lend to you because you are operating as a payment operator on my network. And that's the flywheel that they continue to kind of work on and present. POS for them, again, was a very strong monetizable feature of renting and multiple other things that you can do with POS. So they were constantly thinking of not setting up this infrastructure for a later monetizable date, but how to immediately monetize what they're deploying into the markets. So I think that was somewhere where they kind of had an edge.
BharatPe has grown its user base to 15 million merchants, 3.5 million of whom are considered active users, versus, say, PhonePe, that claims to have an offline merchant coverage of 25 million stores, but over a much longer period. BharatPe also processes $16 billion worth of transactions annually, and on the back of that, has disbursed close to 3,000 crore rupees in loans. But here's the catch. The merchant had to keep the money locked up with BharatPe for 15 days, unlike most payment processors who settle the merchant on the same day or within 24 hours. This was because BharatPe was looking to use that pool of money to lend to others through its P2P or buy now pay later product. But for the merchants, this meant cash flow was getting locked up.
Until you already have a corpus in play where you can kind of give these commitments of giving back the merchants at their due date of what their earnings have been. I mean, it can be a very difficult business. Like P2P, as we know, is a very, very difficult business where it continues to exist, right? We've seen it fraught with regulatory risks. We've seen it, the RBI not being comfortable with this, absolutely. So it is now veering into models where it would have to burn a lot of money.
By interlinking payments, lending, and P2P, BharatPe's business model was fraught with risks. Why? If merchants simply switched off the QR codes or POS devices, the lending business suffered. If P2P deposits faltered, the lending faltered as well. And what makes its P2P lending play doubly dangerous is the commitment to lender merchants that they can withdraw their investments whenever they want, putting extra pressure on the company to keep the merchant deposits coming in. It was just a matter of time RBI came calling.
I think this was also reported that couple of banks, I think RBI had raised it with the banks, and then the bank also raised it with BharatPe. So that was definitely a matter of concern. I think sometime it happened sometime in last year.
Yeah. And even before that, it had sought an NBFC license that in 2020, which RBI rejected. Its P2P joint ventures, I think, also came under RBI's scrutiny, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but to be fair on the NBFC license part, I will say that was, that was not just a BharatPe problem. That was also because, RBI was basically looking at any of the fintechs with more than 10% of shareholding in any Mauritius-based investor. That was a red flag because Mauritius was still in that grey FATF list, and that was causing the concern.
Even BharatPe's peer-to-peer lending got the regulators' goat.
It's been in the scanner for some time, right? Like whether it's for the NBFC thing, now it's going for a JV with Centrum. So it has been under the RBI, let's say, attention net, because here's a company which is trying to kind of get at least certain licenses and stuff. So I think so, yes. And I think generally P2P is an industry which doesn't seek or doesn't have the confidence of the regulators so much. Of course, there are P2P and BFC guidelines which are there, but if the guidelines are so clear, why haven't we seen more startups or more lenders come into this space?
Grover knew it very well, and so he was desperate to get into banking to access cheap capital. And that chance fell on his lap when a cooperative bank, PMC, collapsed.
the unfolding PMC Bank scam, where the CEO of the Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank confessed that a stunning 70% of the bank's loans had been routed to HDIL, a Mumbai-based real estate developer. Aside from violating banking risk limits and engaging in fraud, there's the additional challenge that HDIL is bankrupt, making it unlikely that the bank and its depositors can recover the money owed to them.
BharatPe teamed up with Centrum, with whom it already had business links, and floated a joint venture, Unity Small Finance Bank, that took over the ailing PMC with a mission to create a digital bank. Many said this was a marriage of convenience and was doomed right from the start. It seems several of them are indeed having the last laugh.
No, absolutely. And I think so that, somewhere I think even Centrum is facing the heat because of this. And, while a lot of people and Ashneer himself says the fact that, PMC and the entire Unity Bank merger did get a go ahead from the cabinet. But, the other side of the story is that this is a very freaky situation, right? Like at one end, PMC has been, non-working for months and months, where depositors are asking back for their money. Here comes, a JV which could potentially save the entire future of PMC. And then right as it is kind of launching into the market, this entire issue about, BharatPe kind of explodes out of proportion. So I think that nobody actually has an option right now, and everyone's trying to figure out an option, but it's definitely the status quo is too big to kind of, mess around with at present.
And for the moment, everyone is on mission damage control.
What's interesting to see is how, like, even Centrum is kind of putting its boat together, because, somewhere you see that Centrum also wants to show for Unity that, it has the best board and it has like very, very seasoned professionals there who have in the past run banks, run JVs, and now they're board members. So I think so that, everyone in a certain way is cloaking up to ensure that there is no like long-standing reputational damage that can kind of come to the entire fore.
But a lot of premium that BharatPe enjoys today is predicated upon its part ownership in a bank, a highly, highly regulated industry.
More than Centrum, I think like BharatPe is kind of swindling this entire license in front of the investors more than I think Centrum is, to be very honest. But I think Economic Times had also reported this earlier that the license is on Centrum's name at the end of the day, and BharatPe eventually has to exit this JV, right? So therefore, they have a limited time and window in the history of the company to kind of make an impact through whatever tools that they have access to. Therefore, you will hear things like, now I do not know where those plans stand because there are more burning issues at hand, but 2025, 2026 IPO, or like, some other things that are coming in, more SOPs for merchants, etc. So all these things it's a banking license that's kind of giving them the confidence to say these things, and they would definitely like to kind of get the bang on the buck to kind of ensure that they kind of are in a more stable position after their JV expires.
So in this game of high stakes, as allegations of fraud involving Grover's family members come to light, in fact, they have actually been trickling in even before that audio clip surfaced this January, ever since the taxman started questioning about alleged fake invoices, ghost vendors. It's really become a public circus, thereby making Grover's future association with the company more and more untenable, even as both sides lawyer up.
I would say that, how things are panning out, whether it's the investigation, which kind of like, or the preliminary findings of the investigation, which talk about financial frauds coming in, and financial frauds coming in from, linked to, the head of controls and also his wife, Madhuri there. So I think so that entire bit feels like, there could be a cornering of him in the situation here. And that's exactly why I think that there is a need to control the narrative. But I don't know, to be honest. There could be maybe a thing where he could not be in the executive role, but could be a shareholder, and his agreements might change. So I'm sure that there is something that the boards and him are also working out on the sides to. While I mean, the situation, at least what it looks like, is that it's not so amiable.
Correct.
I mean, it also clearly shows that Ashneer is on his own right now in this whole battle. So it is very important for him to come out and start talking about how he thinks, about how he's seeing things from his perspective. Because as is evident from his letter to seeking removal of Suhail Samir CEO, it's also very clear that things aren't that great with the board members.
My take. We don't know yet how this saga will end. As we have reported, Grover is also exploring cashing out of his company himself, but parallelly is also talking legal. But let's be honest about two things. First, this is not the first time that related party transactions involving family members of a startup founder has come to light. Similar allegations have plagued Ola, Food Panda, Flipkart before it was sold to Walmart, and many, many others. Controlling operations among a few people, usually from friends and family fraternity, is equally commonplace. Byju's, a classic example, one would say. But this is where the board and the venture capitalists needs to be held more accountable. Why were they not forceful enough to install processes and systems or professionalize the management? Why did the venture capitalists not do enough diligence before putting money into the company? Everybody wakes up post facto. The challenge is, unlike listed companies where the laws are stricter, the scanner is tighter, that for the private universe is relatively lax, which allows this to keep happening again and again. Some get caught out, most do not. Overbearing regulations may choke these young companies, but when someone like a BharatPe dabbles into regulated space like financial services, or their operations involve public money, shouldn't there be some checks and balances in place? For now, the board of BharatPe is in capital preservation mode, but they must answer these questions, as do the regulators. You've been listening to Ashneer Grover Ko Gussa Kyun Aata Hai on the Morning Brief with me, your host Arijit Barman. Thank you, Tarush and Digbijay. Deeply appreciate. This episode was produced by Nehal Chaliawala from ET and Saundarya Jayachandran from Awaz. Swati Joshi was the sound editor from Awaz. Executive producer, yours truly. I hope you enjoyed listening to the episode. Do send in your feedback to the Morning Brief at timesgroup.com and share the episode on your social media networks. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursdays and Friday. Thank you. Goodbye and good luck. All clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits mentioned in description.